Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our college and career chats. For accessibility, this presentation will be recorded. Uh, if anyone has any time like question, we would kindly ask for them to utilize the chat. If they need translation, they can also ask questions in regards to what is being presented in the presentation in the chat. At the end of the presentation, we will have the opportunity for each of you to unmute yourselves and ask any questions in regards to what is being presented tonight. And so for tonight's college and career chats, we're going to go ahead and talk about your financial wellness and how we can have you apply for any type of institution and be able to uh, utilize any applicable financial aid in order to help you pay for any institution that you would like to attend to and pursue the education and academic pathway that you wish to pursue. All right, so without further ado, what is exactly financial aid? So financial aid is a means of access for you to be able to attend the trade school, higher learning institution that you wish to do so. This could be any local institution or any accredited institution that's recognized by the federal government. And we're going to have two different types of forms that are applicable to uh, eligible residents here in the United States, as well as for those of you who may be undocumented that are currently residing in California and can fall under uh, their specific category and circumstances. So, first of all, uh, what type of financial aid are offered to individuals who apply for the FAFSA application, who's considered a federal student? Uh, and so, there's different types of federal aid that are eligible for these type of individuals. So there's grants, fee waivers, loans, work study, and scholarships. So beginning with grants are a form of financial aid that doesn't have to be repaid, unless, for example, you end up withdrawing from school or you end up owing a refund. Secondly, we have fee waivers that are a non-cash tuition fee waiver or non-cash award that helps cover the cost for the classes that you're currently attending to. Next would be loans. So the benefit of having federal loans is that you pay a much lower interest rate than you would if you were attending or receiving a private loan and attending a university paying off with that private loan, for example, from a Wells Fargo, US Bank, or Chase, etc. Next, we have federal work study. And this is a program that enables colleges to hire students with money that has been allocated from them to essentially provide them with part-time jobs. The benefit of having these work study opportunities is that individuals can be flexible in working the job that they're having on campus and making a means of extra money for them in their pocket. Uh, with this, you're able to contact your school institution and able to have them essentially work with your schedule. So that way we understand that you guys are students, but you guys have to take that time off to be able to attend your classes, dedicate extra time for any midterms or exams that you're having coming up, as well as finals. And then last, we have scholarships, and that's a cash or non-cash award, depending on the type of scholarship. So each scholarship is going to be offered during a deadline period, and it's going to be important to know which scholarships are going to be available to you, depending on, first off, what it is, what's being offered, and how it is that you're going to receive it. It's going to be either some type of tuition fee waiver or a cash award. So for what we just talked about for the federal work study grants and loans, like who is eligible for that? So that's going to be a specific type of individual who is a US citizen, has a high school degree, is eligible in a program or degree that is recognized by the federal government. Valid social security number. Males at this time must be registered for selective service and maintaining satisfactory academic progress. And so at this time, there's 2 points I would like to definitely stress out right now. And that is, first, if you don't meet this criteria, that's totally fine. You may be eligible for a different form of applying for financial aid if you're considered an undocumented individual. And then secondly is maintaining the satisfactory academic progress that comes with when you receive money from federal aid. There's essentially some type of criteria that you have to meet in order to be able to receive that federal awards, and that is maintaining a 2.0 cumulative GPA and a 67% PACE requirement, which is completing 67% of all the attempted classes that you're taking. As long as you're meeting that criteria, and as well as this other criteria that's being mentioned, you can go ahead and what we'll cover in one of the later slides. Go to studentaid.gov to fill out your FAFSA application for the higher learning institution that you wish to apply to. Now, let's say, for example, you don't fall under that specific criteria. Okay, that's totally fine. So in California, we have what's known as the DREAM Act application. So this is eligible for students who are AB 540, and that is for an individual who has graduated from a California high school or has attained a GED, receive a passing mark on a high school proficiency exam. They're registered or they're currently enrolled at an accredited institution of higher education in California. They can't be holding a valid non-immigrant visa. And the same way that it would be for the FAFSA application, it would take into account to notify that you are in need of financial supplements, such as some of what would be the equal to grants from the FAFSA application for your program requirements, depending on the cost of attendance from the institution that you're currently applying for. So how much student aid can I get? So this question is not exactly concrete. So there's a specific way in which that the federal government will determine how it is that you can receive, how much money you can receive to have for your institution. And so first is going to take into account the expected family contribution that you and your parents, depending if you're a dependent student, can provide. So for example, it's going to take into account what income you've made, as well as a series of supplemental income questions, and what your parents have made if you're considered dependent. Then after it takes that calculation, that number, it's going to go ahead and subtract the cost of attendance of the institution that you're taking. So depending on which college you're going to, for example, a two-year college is typically less expensive than a four-year college. So some of them are going to cost more. So they're going to take that number and subtract the cost of each institution that you're applying for, and it's going to give you expected a need for that institution that you're applying for. So you won't know until you apply for the application on how much you'll be able to receive, because that calculation comes differently based off each institution that you're applying your FAFSA or DREAM Act application. Now let's go on. Let's say what's the estimates of how much you can expect to receive during this whole process. So first we have the federal Pell Grant, and this is for students who are filling out the FAFSA application. So the federal Pell Grant is approximately a maximum of $6,495. That is for this given school year. It's important to note that for this Pell Grant, in order to receive the $6,495, you must be considered maximum enrolled registered student. So for example, this is for a student that is enrolled in full-time status, and so they will receive that $6,495. Let's say the student is only registered in half of those units, then they'll only receive half for that amount. And this will be during the fall and spring semester of that institution that they're applying for. However, they can also receive the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, and that's between $100 and $4,000. That's an additional grant that's allocated to students who are in extra financial need, depending on the answers that were provided for their expected family contribution, and still have an unmet need, essentially, because based off of the answers they provided on their FAFSA. A federal work study will depend on the funds that are available at the school. So definitely follow up with your financial aid office on which school has available funds in a federal work study waitlist. Sometimes it can be a little bit competitive to get into, because it is popular, obviously, to have the opportunity to not only make money, but have a flexibility in your schedule to attend your classes and do any homework or do-outs that you might have. And then last is going to be direct subsidized and unsubsidized loans, which is $5,500 total, or up to $9,500 for an independent student. So when you're filling out your application, or whether it's your FAFSA application or your DREAM Act application, there's going to be different documents that are going to be requested from you. And so depending on which application you're going to be doing, it's gonna ask for some of the documents. So if you see something on right here, then and if you don't have it, then it's not going to apply to you for your given application. So first is going to be your student social security card and your driver's license if you have one. Of course, if you're an undocumented student, you're not going to have a social security card. That's totally fine. What's going to happen is you're going to go ahead and just fill out your FAFSA, your Dream Act application, and continue on without a social security number or card. Parents' date of birth and social security number if they have that. And the other part to note is that for students who they themselves have a social security number, but whose parents do not have a social security number, you're still going to go ahead and fill out the FAFSA application. The Dream Act application is only for individuals who don't have a social security number or are undocumented themselves. They're going to be the ones to do that application. However, if one or both your parents don't have a social security number, but you do, go ahead and fill out the FAFSA application. And want to make sure we separate those two. This one you will require in this your federal tax returns and W-2s if you ended up working for the requested year for the current for the application that you're applying for. So for example, each application is going to be using tax information from 2 years back. So if you're doing the 2021-2022 application, you're going to be using your 2019 taxes. As of the 1st of October, the new application has opened up for 2022-2023. So in that case, if you're filling out that application, you're going to be using the tax returns from 2 years back, which is going to be the 2020 tax returns. If you did work during this time, or if your parents worked at this time as well. Now, if you're considered a dependent student, which we'll cover over in a little bit, you'll also have to provide your parent demographics and financial information as well. So that includes their tax returns from either 2019 or 2020, as well as their W-2s. Next is going to be the current information on their cash, checkings, and saving account balances, as well as any investments that they may have, any records of any untaxed income, and then either your permanent resident card or green card if you're not a citizen, and of course if this isn't applicable to you because you don't have either, because you're doing out the Dream Act application, that's totally fine. You're just going to go ahead and proceed without entering that information altogether. So the first step, if you're going to start doing the FAFSA application form, is that you're going to go to studentaid.gov. And then once you get to studentaid.gov, if you're never created what's known as an FSA ID or password, then you're going to go ahead and select on the Start Here button, and you're going to go ahead and do that first. Essentially, your FSA ID and password is your login to being able to have an account. And from your account, you're going to be able to fill out the application. So that's going to be the first step in doing so. And remember that when you do fill out the information for your account, you need it to actually match what's on your social security card to mitigate any confusion or complexities when you end up making that submission to the financial institution that you're applying for. The similar process is going to be for the California Dream Act. So instead, you're just going to go to dreamcsac.ca.gov/landing, and for there, you're also going to create what's known as your Dream ID and password, and you're essentially going to submit your information. You're not going to provide a social security number. So if you don't have a social security number for reference, that's in this case, go ahead and use what's noted on your California driver's license and what goes most prominently in your day-to-day usage. We want to make sure that the information is being consistent across the board, and so there's mitigate any type of possible confusion or complexities in institutions receiving your information, as it may be different from what you put in your application. So what exactly are going to be asked? So both applications actually mirror themselves pretty evenly, and it's going to have a series of 7 different steps in each application for you to complete. And varying depending on whether or not you are a dependent student or whether you're not, you're going to be providing some of that information as well. So for the first step, it's going to be identity information, high school completion status, and education level. Step 2 is going to be, you're going to list up to 10 colleges that you want your application, and it's going to ask you for housing information for each of the colleges that you wish to attend to. Now, it's important to note that nothing is set in stone. So let's say you're uncertain of which colleges you want to apply for. That's okay. You can go ahead and list up to 10 colleges, And if you change your mind on which college that you want to take, that's totally fine. At least that institution will already have your FAFSA application. So that way you don't have to go back and add that institution, which could delay the process for your FAFSA application. The step three is going to be dependency questions to determining your status. So it's going to ask uh, criteria that's been based off of what the federal government determines uh, if you are a dependent or not. Simply being, for example, an 18-year-old student who is no longer living with their parents and doesn't receive money from them doesn't generally mean that they're going to be considered a dependent student. And we'll get to that information later or not for any exceptions to policy for individuals who uh, may not be acquiring any direct assistance from their parents because of a specific special circumstance. Uh, but if that's not the given case, then you are going to be required to provide uh, parental information and financial information. Otherwise, your FAFSA application or DREAM Act application won't be uh, able to be submitted. It's going to go ahead and give you an error, and you'll have to essentially provide that at a given point to be able to proceed with the application. So, and then once you've provided your parent demographics and financial information, it's going to ask for your financial information if, and as well as your spouse if you're married, if you did work for that specific year. So it'll either be 2019 if you're doing for the 2021-2022 application, or your financial information for from your 2020 taxes for the 2023 application. After you've completed that, you're going to go ahead and just review your entire application and sign and submit. It is also important to note that for dependents, you're also going to have your parents create either an FSA ID and password or a DREAM Act ID and password, as they're going to have to sign alongside you for that application in order for it to be submitted. So this is a little bit clarification on which parent information am I going to provide on my FAFSA or DREAM Act application. So this is a general rule of thumb. If your parents are married or live together, you're going to go ahead and report both of them. If not, you're going to report the parent you've lived with most in the past year. If you live with both equally or don't live with your parents, report who provided the most financial support over the past year. If that parent has remarried, also report information from your step parent as well. So this is the part where we get to where, do I have to provide parental information? Okay, so students are generally considered dependent if they are under the age of 24, unless they meet one of the criteria. So criteria for independent status means that you'll turn 24 before the January 1st during the school year. If you are married or separated but not divorced, you have children or other dependents who receive over half of their support from you. Since age 13, both your parents have been deceased, you have been in foster care, or you were a dependent of a ward of court. You are currently serving in active duty in the armed forces or a veteran. You're enrolled in a master's or doctorate program. You are or were an emancipated minor, or someone other than a parent or step parent had legal guardianship over you. You are homeless or at risk of being homeless. And so for how this can be determined is for official documentation. And the way that works is that you'll have to essentially provide some form of legal document that can verify or legitimize your claim that you are considered one of these categories, as not only does the federal government request verification for a lot of the criteria that's being presented, you may be randomly selected to just present general criteria that's from the FAFSA application that you're providing. And so in this circumstance, if a student responded no to any of the questions that were previously placed, if you were not born before or born over the age of 24, or turned 24 after 24 on January 1st, or any if you're married, have children, etc., then you are considered a dependent student, unless you have an exception to policy, which we'll go ahead and cover in a bit. But if you selected yes, then you are considered an independent student, even if you haven't reached the age of 24, as long as you meet one of the criteria that's been covered. So these are some of the exceptions, dependency overrides, in case that you didn't meet. So this is what we consider to be special circumstances. And if you're unable to complete your FAFSA application, go ahead and at this point, uh, contact your financial aid department so that way they can help you complete essentially what is requested so you can fulfill the requirements of that special circumstance. But this is the general uh, idea or circumstances where there it could be an exception to policy, and that's if your parents are incarcerated, if you left home due to an abusive environment, you don't know where your parents are, you can't contact them, you're older than 21 but are not yet 24, and you're unaccompanied, homeless, or self-supporting, or at the risk of becoming homeless. And the process for these is what's called a dependency override. And like we mentioned, you're going to have to contact your financial aid office and they might request any further documentation to essentially prove your current circumstance, which can be a variety of documents. And that's when you're going to essentially work with the authorized official at the office and providing them what they need in order to override you. And so these are some of the errors that frequently happen, and that's any social security numbers that are incorrectly placed. Uh, we want to make sure that in order to expedite the entire process of your FAFSA application, that you're providing the correct information in order to essentially give you your money as soon as possible. Uh, the other thing is the information that you're providing with your social security number when you create your FSA ID has to match. So that way, like I said, there's no complexities, there's no issues will be happening. Next is divorced or remarried parental information. For students who are still married but are in the process of getting divorced, they're still technically married. They're not divorced or vice versa until that document essentially goes through. So if let's say the student is single and they're trying to become in marriage status but they don't have the marriage certificate yet, they're still considered uh, single. And the same thing with parents. They have to have the official documentation. If they're married just by a church, but they don't have the civil marriage certificate, then they're not considered actually married. They have to have that legal binding documentation. You're going to need the income earned from the parents and step parents. Sometimes students end up reporting the worth of their house or invest as part of their investments. It'll specify in the questions for the income for financial income for both you and your parents not to enter specific numbers, as it can inflate the expected family contribution and make you possibly not eligible for financial aid. And so we want to make sure we put in the right answers the right time so we don't have to go back and change them because we accidentally put in higher numbers than we were supposed to. Next is untaxed income, and then US income taxes that were paid, the household size. So how many dependents are your parents currently taking care of? Make sure that it's individuals that are being supported 50% of the time or more, uh, or any other individuals that your parents can be providing as well. So sometimes, for example, uh, there may be a dependent in the household who is being taken care of by the parents that the student is not reporting, which can also include a grandparent or an uncle or someone else. As long as that individual is being supported 50% of the time, they can be listed onto their FAFSA application, and vice versa. If there's individuals that are being listed that aren't supposed to be listed, then they have to be essentially removed because the federal government might ask for verification for that exact number of individuals in that household. And then next is the number of students who are actually going to be in college, uh, as well as, like we said, the real estate and investment net worth of what the student is actually reporting. Make sure not to report any real estate, such as their house that they're living in, as some type of net worth for your FAFSA application. So we're actually hosting two different types of Cash for College event workshops, and they're going to come up. We're going to go ahead and drop that in the chat real quick. It's going to be on November 3rd from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. and then November 18th from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., where we can actually fill out the entire FAFSA application or DREAM Act application step by step and cover any questions that you may have at that time.